Late to the movies? Yeah, that was an option I was thinking about.
I like that one. That's a good one.
All right.
Watch out for that podcast. It's a doozy.
I'm gonna leave it all in.
Good.
As you guys know, I don't really know how to start yet, but it'll either be just sort of like we just had, or welcome to Late to the Movies. I'm Ben Holt, and this is a podcast where my friends and I get to fill in our movie blind spots, and sometimes family. Every week, we pick a movie that either I or a guest hasn't seen before, but really should have by now. This week, the movie is Groundhog Day. The guests this week are Kay.
Hello.
Sam.
Hello.
And Bree.
Hi.
How's it going, guys?
Going good.
Good.
Cool.
Very snowy.
Very snowy.
Very snowy. Yeah, we're talking to you post blizzard. So actually, this episode's coming out tomorrow as we're recording it. So if you're listening to it right when it comes out, you know what we're talking about, because I would be surprised if you don't also live near where I am. But, hey, if you don't, that's great. But for me and probably most of the people who listen to this podcast, we had a blizzard yesterday.
Lots of snow.
Yeah.
I think our city's count ended up being like 18 to 19 inches.
Yeah.
That's a lot of snow.
Yeah, and this is a movie that has a lot of snow in it too.
Yeah,
so.
there's a blizzard talked about quite a bit in it. So
Ended up being
kind of good timing.
great
It
timing.
really ended up pretty good. I don't know. Excited to talk about the movie. This will be our first Bill Murray one, our first Harold Ramis one, and Andy McDowell too.
Yep.
Our first Brian Doyle. Actually, it's our second Brian Doyle Murray. He was the boss in Christmas Vacation.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it's our second Bill Murray's older brother movie, but our first Bill Murray movie. But first, before we get into that, I want to as always, mention up front, I've seen this before. You guys have?
I have.
And first time for you, Bree?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I hadn't seen it in ages. It had probably been years since
Yeah.
I'd actually just sat down and watched it. But they usually show it around this time of year, so I've definitely caught pieces here and there.
Yeah, it's the only game in town for Groundhog
It is,
Day
yeah,
holiday
it's very
movies, I
true.
think. Let's talk a little bit about what you guys have been watching lately. Last time we recorded was a few weeks ago, so I don't know if anything has come up for you guys recently.
I was gonna say I haven't really done any new movies or anything, but I rewatched The Good Place, which kind of I was telling Ben felt like I was thinking a lot more philosophically about Groundhog Day as I was watching it because of that kind of leading into it. So I have a lot of thoughts when we get to that topic. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good pairing.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah. How about you?
Because we mostly it was the same TV shows
Right,
we
yeah.
talked about last time. I guess the only main thing I have to add is that I watched Goodfellas in like a situation where like I don't know if I've ever watched all of Goodfellas, so I was like, oh, let's just sit down. I ended up watching it like kind of like a mini series by mistake because I'll like watch it before bed. I was like, I'm falling asleep, so I'm gonna turn it off Goodfellas because it's like almost I think it's like 2.5 hours long. But yeah, I was like, have I seen all this movie? I'd seen all the scenes. I'd seen the funny how, like a clown, do I amuse you scene, but like, I guess in my brain, I always was like, I feel like I've never seen the heist scene, and then realized after the fact that that's all done off screen. They don't actually have a heist in the movie. It's just, I probably ruined a future episode of this podcast, but.
Well, I don't know if it's like maybe you get spoiled good.
Yeah, but yeah, no, good movie. I don't think it's like the greatest movie of all time, but that's a conversation for another day. But like, it's a good movie. I just
A decent amount of people do, so that's
interesting. Where I was at, where I was like, oh, I make sure I'll watch it. And again, maybe not watching it all at once was a bad thing. But like, yeah, it was a good movie, good Scorsese movie, good mob movie. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. I feel like I just kind of rambled an ending there, but.
Were you also watching Goodfellas?
No, I was asleep.
Okay.
He has his white man in his 30s moments when it's my nap time or my sleep time.
Yeah, so Bree usually goes to bed at 10. Then I usually conk out between like 12 and 1. So it's like when she's asleep, I've joked that I'm watching my white guy in his 30s shows and movies. So it's like I'm cruising through The Sopranos now. I finished The Wire. I'm going to watch Friday Night Lights after this for the first time. So like...
TV show or movie?
TV show. Maybe both. I don't know. Who knows? It gets weird. I'm halfway through a Sopranos season. I was like, I just want to watch Goodfellas. So like, I'm literally like season 3, episode 4 or something. Like I'm not like at the end of a season. And I was just like, let's just sneak Goodfellas in there.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of movies recently because of Oscars are coming up. Oscar voting just started. A lot of Guild Award nominees were announced this week. So I watched Power of the Dog. I was waiting because Blank Check, another podcast I listen to, is doing Jane Campion movies. I was going to wait until they get up to that one, but I didn't want to wait anymore. So I watched it. It's awesome. It's the best Benedict Cumberbatch has ever been in a movie, I think. It looks amazing. The music is great. Hopefully Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead wins an Oscar for it. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I was looking into Power of the Dog, and one of the things that was interesting to me was just, seeing it's a cowboy movie, and I asked Bree, I was like, do you know who's the lead in this cowboy movie? And, Bree's like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, pick who you think is the least cowboy person of all time. And she just immediately said Benedict Cumberbatch.
Without knowing anything about this movie. I'd never heard of it. Yeah. But just that phrasing, the least cowboy, the least person you'd expect in a Western like cowboy movie. And I almost said Tom Hiddleston, which would have been in the same boat. Yeah. But something in me was like, it has to be Benedict Cumberbatch.
I mean, you're not wrong. He's very much the antithesis of what you think a cowboy is.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's him leaning into a certain mode for a very specific purpose. The character obviously is, wasn't born into that, but he's like a Yale educated guy that everyone thinks of as like this really great conversationalist and stuff, but it gets really into the rancher in Montana lifestyle.
Did you watch Don't Look Up yet?
I have not.
Okay. Well, we don't have to. I just remembered we did watch that.
Oh, that was in between the.
That was in between.
Okay. Oh,
but you talked about it in a previous, and without you being able to talk about it, we would just be saying like the same things. Like no spoilers, but it's good.
I did not like it.
Yeah.
No spoilers, but Jonah Hill was the best, only good part of that movie.
Jonah Hill plays an asshole so good that I almost hate him in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's as good as This Is the End.
I would say it's better almost.
Wait.
Like
Jonah
his
Hill
version of playing an
just
asshole.
him being.
Oh, I think so.
It's the same character for sure. It's definitely him just being like the kind of like he's the White House chief of staff in the movie, and his whole thing is just like calling people sweetheart and you know what I mean, and just like all that, like throwing food on the ground instead of handing it to them, just like just really just jerk ass stuff.
This Is the End is a better movie,
yes.
but his character is better in Don't Look Up. No, This Is the End is definitely better than Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up's got a lot of good moments. There was also
it has some good moments, but overall, I was kind of over how hard they were trying to push that narrative. Like I agree with the narrative, but it was just not fun to watch. It was kind of agonizing the entire way. It was too long.
Things like that. It's like if we've lived through something that was like a similar kind of administration that you're trying to kind of farce here. Like, I don't need to see this again.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's get into Groundhog Day. Who wants to do the plot summary in a minute or less?
I can try.
Here we go.
I haven't done one yet.
You don't get it, you
and
can always
I
try again.
immediately have forgotten everything that happens in this movie, so we'll see how it goes.
There's a rodent.
There is a rat that tells the weather. It's Ratatouille for weather. Ratatouille for weather.
I'm going to see if I can Photoshop that onto the poster as like the tagline.
Oh my god!
All right,
that better make
go
the
whenever. Go whenever you're ready.
All right, so Bill Murray is a weatherman in Pittsburgh. He is being tasked with covering the Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney. He, Annie McDowell, and Chris Elliott are the team that is sent from the weather and from the news station. He is very arrogant, and he does not really think this is something that he should be doing. They arrive. He does it kind of facetiously the entire time, not quite happy to be there, does the broadcast, goes to sleep,
30 seconds.
Wakes up the next morning, and it is the same day. This continues to happen many, many times again and again. He lives the same day. He goes through kind of ups and downs of, am I going to be good? Am I going to kind of live with no consequences? He kills himself a lot, which I had forgotten happens. And then he eventually kind of just lives his best life, ends up with Annie McDowell's character. They fall in love, and they live on to the next day.
Good. You did with about 5 seconds to spare.
Boom, boom, boom.
Well done. I think the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie before the loop resets is the least charming Bill Murray's is in any of like the big comedies that he does, I think.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's in dramatic films too, and you know.
It's very much still kind of like Bill Murray's vibe, but like very kind of like just pushed right over that line into like a complete asshole. Like
it's just like by a degree too caustic and just a little bit too at everyone else's expense kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I hated watching him. I was like, can we get past when he starts being good? Because like this is this is kind of painful to watch. Like I hate him.
Even that part at the very, very beginning when he is like talking about the weather and he like goes and sits down next to the woman and she's like, you've been there, like you've done this twice before, right? And he's like 4 times. And I was like, oh shit. Like it's just like, yeah, he's just a little bit too caustic. Like that's absolutely the word. On purpose, I'm sure.
Exactly,
but
yeah.
I think it's like this and Scrooged are probably the 2 movies.
I don't think I've ever seen Scrooge.
Scrooged. I mean, it's just
I assume
Christmas Carol.
Yeah, Christmas Carol.
So he's the Scrooge character, the titular
Yep,
Scrooge,
yep.
and so the beginning he's also being mean there. But yeah, it's essentially that. Like, there's not a lot of movies where he's, especially as the main protagonist, being that caustic.
I think that's an interesting point of comparison because one of the things that I was thinking about a lot this time that is how the movie kind of operates. With A Christmas Carol, Scrooge is explicitly told this is what's happening and this is what we expect you to get out of it. Whereas this just sort of starts happening and there's never any, you know, angel or conscience type character that comes in to say like, you gotta get it right or you can't get out of the loop. He's just, he just does it. And so eventually I think it'd be the same thing. You just be like, okay, well, I guess nothing matters. And you just become way more of a nihilist, which isn't what happens in Christmas Carol, right? I remember Michael Caine. He doesn't just like
Gonzo.
He doesn't just like steal Kermit and drive off with him.
No, he does not.
All right. Yeah. So starting with Bill Murray is probably as good a place as any. As it goes on, he modulates his performance depending on what it's doing. And I like that it's not a straight line. He has a lot of peaks and valleys, which makes a lot of sense for this.
Yeah. I feel like thinking back on it, I, again, had not really sat down and watched this probably since high school. And I don't think I had remembered how many kind of iterations of the different, like redoing a scene with like a slightly different, like frantic energy of like, you can tell he's getting frustrated at like having to redo certain things, or the number of times that he either like electrocutes himself in the bathtub or like jumps off a building and then kind of drives off a cliff. And it just kind of, it's not all of those happen at once. It's kind of spread throughout, which absolutely makes sense. I'm certain someone at some point has done a number of like how many times they kind of, it would make sense for him to have relived this day, but it's way more than I had remembered. Like it feels like it's probably like he's done this for like over a year at this point.
I think I looked into this a little bit, and Harold Ramis says that he thinks he was in the loop for 10 years. And a lot of people that have done like research and like calculations can estimate anywhere between like 20 and 40 years of like having to master skills, whether he's like learning card tricks while he's also learning ice sculpting. You know, like a lot of people, like that's a lot to do in one day. He probably just like lays on a couch for like 3 hours a lot, like without, because he's just bored or he's just tired or whatever. But yeah, it's tough to quantify because we don't see it, but it would have to be a while. You'd have to assume that it is like a good 5 to 10 years of his life are stuck in here.
The original idea, that according to Ramis, is that it's 10,000 years, and then later he's said probably maybe 10 years. So I was trying to look at, like you said, people have studied it. I tried to look at how long does it take to be, you know, sufficient at piano, and it's basically like 6 months of practicing every day, and you get like, you can like play a song that you're practicing. But he's doing like jazz piano improvisation by the end, and that's got to be years.
Yeah.
Right? That's not like, you can't learn that.
No.
Yeah, piano is not easy.
That poor girl that gets kicked out of that class so many times. I know it's only once for her, but yeah,
right.
But
yeah, I always wondered, does he like, it'd be like, hey, what time could I have come today that you were free?
Yeah.
Just like, let that girl have her lesson.
Yep.
10,000 times she gets kicked out.
But yeah, I mean, and not just that one skill. It's like he's become
Right,
so
that's the
good
thing
at so
too.
many
Yeah.
things that it must have been years and years and years and years of him just having time to kind of pick up where he left off the day before. Because at one point, I mean, the part where he's going to the hospital and he has to see the chart, like they never talk about it, but it's implied he is some sort of medical professional or like has
Yep.
the knowledge to
Yeah,
do that.
a
And then-
couple times it's
yeah,
he
someone
has-
refers to him as Dr. Connors
Right.
later. Like
he gets really good at the Heimlich maneuver
yeah.
because his brother must be
Yep.
having that same choking episode at the same time every day. He gets a
Yeah.
lot of practice.
I was wondering if Brian Doyle Murray's character dies, if he doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, because I feel like that
Yeah.
would really ruin the night. He's essentially the leader of the inner circle of the Groundhogs.
Yep. you got
So like, if that dude dies that night choking,
Mhm.
I feel like that changes the mood of the whole town. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like there's
he must not, because there's other times that Murray's still like out at the bar when that
Yeah.
party's happening.
So it must just be like a really traumatizing thing, and he probably gets it out, or somebody else Heimlichs him, and he's just doing it because he wants the notoriety for that moment
Oh,
because he can leverage
interesting
it
take,
later.
Yeah, he's just leveraging.
Yeah.
That is one interesting thing about the arc that I forgot, is that around 40 minutes in, it starts doing kind of the rom-com stuff. And by an hour in, he's already kind of flubbed it because the way he's doing it is just creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that
Yeah.
like, as opposed to all the heroic stuff that he does, whether it be for selflessness or like the notoriety for it, he just does a lot of creepy stuff, like
Yeah.
just trying over and over
Yeah.
to try to sleep with different women, like trying, like remembering things, like kind of basically stalking them. Isn't really the right word, because like it's the same day for them, but like he's memorizing all these small things to be able to sleep with them later, and that's just the creepiest part about that
it's
whole
like
time loop
that
part.
Yeah.
calculated kind
Exactly.
of mode of and I think Annie McDowell's character calls him on it at the end of like their first, like when the night's gone really well and he finally gets back, and she goes, why do you keep like saying things like that? Or have you talked to my friends? Did you like, and she like recognizes something is weird about the way that this is happening.
Yeah, and then it only eventually works for him when he doesn't spend the whole day with her
Mm-hmm.
and is
He's
just
genuine.
doing other stuff. And then at the end of the day, she's like, wow, you had a really good day.
Yeah.
And I like too that the very last one, which we're very much jumping to the end now, but like
No.
Screw
when
it.
she like they wake up in the morning and she says like, yeah, you didn't even like do anything. You just told me to like stay, and like we like went to sleep. It's like good. Like that is the arc. Yeah.
I want to talk about the pacing of this movie because inherently I'm always a big pacing guy. It's a weird thing to be like part of, but it's the thing I notice about a movie immediately. Like, is the pacing good or not? For a time loop movie, it's tough because pacing is both everything and nothing at the same time. Like, it's very odd. But one thing I want to key in on is that, and it goes with the pacing, is that the relationships seem to evolve, even though essentially everyone besides Bill Murray should be approaching this day the same way. To me, it feels very weird. I'm going to hone in on Chris Elliott's character because it's the most stark one. Chris Elliott starts as like the foil to Bill Murray almost, in almost like a protagonistic way. I don't know if that's a word, but I made it up.
Yeah.
Like Bill Murray's an asshole and Chris Elliott's just like, oh shucks, you know, like, oh, like sarcastically, you know, like everything, like, oh, like Bill Murray's just going to be a jerk. And we're supposed to.
Did he really call himself the talent?
Yeah. So like you're supposed to like Chris Elliott. And then about halfway through the movie, there starts to be stuff like he wakes up and he starts to try to do better. Or actually, this is more towards the end, I guess. But like, you know, he gets them coffee in the morning. He gets Andy McDowell and Chris Elliott coffee in the morning. And like, you start seeing Chris Elliott approaching the rest of the movie, approaching Bill Murray's character in a much more positive light. And on one hand, we don't see every start to the morning. So maybe Bill Murray knows that if he gets him a coffee in the beginning of the morning, the rest of the day he's kind of feels ingratiated to him.
Yeah.
But then we like pivot to Chris Elliott's actually kind of a creep.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
God,
you just can't fight nature, I think.
Yeah.
And that was something I said too. Is it's like, Chris Elliott's kind of a normal guy, but everyone still treats him like a Chris Elliott character.
Yeah.
Like you just get to a point where you're like, no, that's Chris Elliott. I know his thing. He's gonna do something gross.
Yeah. So it's just weird to me. Like, and it's most also stark with Andy McDowell. We were just talking about, she has, all these days where she's supposed to start not like Bill Murray. She's an optimist, so you can kind of hand wave it in your head.
Yeah.
But the last day, like you said, nothing happens with her. And now she's making out with him in bed, where the previous time, like, that he pitched a perfect day, shall we say, and she didn't even really want to kiss him. Now she's kissing him in bed the next morning and everything's hunky-dory. Like, it just
and agreeing to
feels-
move in with him, like, to another
know.
town. Like, that would have
Yeah.
literally
He definitely
just
said
been a
he
day
loved her
spending
too,
together.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
It made no
Right.
sense.
No.
Yeah. So at that point, they had met like 2.5 days earlier.
Yeah.
So I think it's tough because on the one hand, that switch only works if they only met the day before, and she can be like, "Oh, I guess he was having a bad day yesterday, and normally he's a great guy." But then at the same time, them ending up like together, that probably only works if they've known each other for a while, and it's like a normal rom-com setup of like, these two don't get along, but they're more similar than they know. But for her, it's like, well, we just met yesterday. I don't really know what this guy's about.
Yeah.
We drove from Pittsburgh to here, and then he went to a different hotel, and I haven't seen him since.
And he was kind of a dick the whole time. Like,
Right,
that's,
yeah. But now I've spent a grand total like a couple hours with him, and he seems pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand. I don't think the movie could have ended any other way for it to still have as much like heart as it does. Even though logically we understand that does not make sense for her to kind of, as a character, as a person, decide, no, I'll move in with this guy. Like that sounds great. The arc that he goes through and the way that last day goes, that kind of payoff does make sense for the movie. And for kind of his journey to kind of end in that place makes a lot of sense. But again, logically, no, it does not make sense.
Yeah, it's tough. Can you get that a little closer? I told you weren't going to lean forward, though. Yeah, I think it's interesting. So do you guys think he gets a lot of opportunities to do this one day and ends up in many different like kind of material objective ways having at least the trappings of being a good person. So does that last when he like goes back to his normal job and back to Pittsburgh and stuff, or because he gets a lot of chances in practice at doing this one day, but I don't know if that really extends.
I think if you're stuck in a time loop for 10 to 20 years, whatever it ends up being, I think that changes you, and you probably don't want to get back in a situation where you're in that again, having to like learn your life lessons. Yeah. So I think he might actually be changed for the better by the end of it.
He at least knows piano really well.
Yeah. He can go into a lot of different professions now.
I would be worried. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I would be worried about it recurring if that happened in real life. Like, God, I hope this doesn't happen again. Like the next Groundhog Day was probably very traumatic for him.
Right?
Just,
yeah.
Like, really
for
hoping
sure.
that
not covering that anymore.
Yeah, not going to Punxsutawney. He wants to move there, but he probably shouldn't go to Punxsutawney anymore.
Yeah, like maybe it's a this town thing.
Yeah.
But I agree. I agree with Bree that I think if we're going with the kind of idea, which is the only thing that makes sense for him to have gained all these skills, that he's been here for legitimately upwards of a decade and been living, you just naturally will be a different person by the time you come out of that. And I think they tried to portray that with that last day of he wasn't trying to kind of be over the top. He wasn't really trying to get with Andie MacDowell anymore. It was more just he knew this was kind of the best way to live his life in that day, and that's what he was trying to do.
I do like that the whole town knows who he is. And like the last that, like everyone's like, "Oh, Phil, get up there, Phil." It's like you've known him for like 16 hours at this point.
Yeah. The piano teacher being like, he's my student. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
This
okay.
becomes like a local bon vivant.
Yeah,
It's just like, this
the
is the guy.
waitress loves him, having probably only seen him for like an hour that day.
At most. Yeah, and it's all, it kind of is just like, I guess he was very busy because he had to have hit all those same people on the same day.
Right, yeah, like after all those years of like doing all these loops and like he's probably figured out like the most efficient way to do everything and like see everyone, that by that last day he knew like exactly where to be at all times, and like everyone in the town, since I don't know how small the town is, but I'm assuming pretty small, would know like who he is, have heard about him, like, hey, did you hear this guy? Like the weatherman like saved this guy's life, or like, you know, was here right when this kid fell out of a tree. Like
never thanked him once.
No, never thanked him
once. What do you say? Brat. What are your favorite kind of looping things? What are your favorite bits that they do? I always forget not to ask a question, then be like, and I'll go next. I think the scene where he's driving the drunk guys is really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. I like
That's
how the
early
drunk.
too.
Yeah, it happens pretty
I
early.
was like, that's like the third
That's when
night.
That's
he,
either
when he
second or third
realizes
night.
I can do whatever I want.
And like how freaked out the drunk guys get.
Yeah.
Yes.
I happen to agree with that rule.
Yeah.
Mine favorite is Ned Ryerson, and
Well, yeah. it's
one
gotta
of,
be,
but
right?
I will add a thing to it. Ned Ryerson, played by Stephen Toblerone. Tolobowski. I can't. It's an inside joke between me and Bree because I could not think of Stephen Tolobowski. It's Tolobowski.
Tobolowski.
Tobolowski.
Yeah.
Damn it. Sorry, Stephen.
I know
But,
Tobo's listening.
Yeah, he's definitely listening. But I mean, we watched the remake of One Day at a Time that he is in. We watched Silicon Valley, which he's in, and I kept calling him Toblerone because I couldn't think of what his actual last name is.
I think that was like my joke
Oh
originally.
yeah, maybe. Like,
And then I
Stephen-
brought it to you because I never remember his last name, and
Yeah.
then you just stuck to it. And now
Yeah.
you just barely remember. his
Yeah, so
actual
yeah,
name.
he's just Toblerone in my head forever. But I do love him despite not knowing his name. But the two things that I think are great about that is one, as an actor, he is really just wringing every little inch
Yeah.
he can
So
get out of
good.
this character
Yep.
to the degree that like every character he does has at least a little bit of Ned Ryerson in him, I think, for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
Ned
And-
Ryerson
for
became
sure.
part of him.
Yeah.
And, a headcanon that I have for it that might actually be Harold Ramis's actual like thought process is because of the way the day happens, you know, like you think about they're passing on the street. It's very hard to like really link that up simultaneously. Like as a show or a movie, like it's good to have that interaction repeatedly so you can see the differences. So I understand, you know, Harold Ramis being like, oh, they pass each other in the street. But like to think like if Bill Murray's like out the door 10 seconds earlier, that shouldn't happen, at least not in the same place. So my headcanon is that Ned Ryerson has seen Bill Murray's character and is basically waiting to try to do like a happenstance like
Yeah.
thing because
Yeah.
he's trying to
He
pitch
knows
him
he's
insurance.
coming to town, so
Yeah.
he makes it seem like an
I
accident.
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
just been standing like in that crosswalk
Yeah.
or whatever. For,
Literally.
Yeah, the part where like Bill Murray hugs him and is like, "What you gonna call it? Can you call in sick? Where are you going?"
Yeah, I don't know where you're going, but can you call in sick?
Yeah, it's so good.
Very funny. That's one of the ones that you have to figure. I mean, I didn't look it up. Maybe not. Maybe it's all written out, but there has to be dozens of versions of that scene, and then they just picked. You know, it's well known what 5 or 6 times actually in the movie.
Mhm.
But yeah,
They probably just had him do it again and again.
yeah, it's just like, just try something different, and they're both really good actors, so
Yeah.
they both just go with it. You know, Tobolowski, 4th build in the credits
Oh,
because there's just not a lot of people who have a lot of lines
Yeah.
in the movie.
true enough.
Yeah, it's like him and Brian Doyle Murray are probably the only other
Yeah,
two.
I think the actress who plays Nancy is in there is like 5th or 6th also.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Michael Shannon's in there.
Yep.
Just for a
Oh
second.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Which I only knew
Super
because
young Michael Shannon.
I
Excited
paused-
about WrestleMania.
I paused the Amazon Prime. I scanned the cast before. I was like, oh, Michael Shannon's in this movie somewhere. And then during that scene, for whatever reason, I paused the movie and it was on Amazon, so it tells you who's in the scene. I'm like,
Yep.
oh no, he's in the like. I had to go find him because in this first scene he's in, his face isn't shown. So
No.
Yeah.
can't see his eyes.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, once you see his face, you're like, oh yeah, that's Michael
That's
Shannon.
Michael Shannon.
It's definitely him.
Most intense looking person in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Um,
So good.
the one that I like, I feel like it's the one I remembered the most clearly was the part where Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell are making the snowmen, and then they have the snowball fight, and then they're walking and kind of like dancing on the gazebo. And I remembered that part super clearly. And I don't think I had remembered that they do it again. And in the like immediate aftermath, Bill Murray just has this like crazy look in his eyes and is like trying to do like hit all the like marks as quickly as he
Yeah.
can. And he's like,
yeah, he's forcing it so
yeah,
hard.
he's just like screaming at the kids, "Can I adopt you?" And he's like throwing it. It's just like the craziest
So it's like, oh no, a young man has thrown a snowball at us.
Yeah. Just like it felt like an NPC had just like gone like
Yep.
Yeah.
like off the wall, like they'd glitched somehow, and he's just like, "I gotta hit all these points and do all these things and say all these
Yes.
things." And like
Yeah.
it was so funny for me to have like I clearly remembered the first part and I did not remember that part.
Mhm.
And then the other thing I didn't remember, which was just like a quick scene, was the part where he steals the money from the like bank, and then he rolls
Very
up in
funny.
like is it like a Rolls Royce, the car? And then he gets out in a
Clint Eastwood. He's doing Clint Eastwood and Good, the Bad,
yeah, and the girl's in a maid outfit, and it's like, I thought we were going to like a party. And he's like, no, I'm just going to see my favorite movie, which was Heidi 2.
Heidi 2. He goes, he's doing a Clint Eastwood impression. He goes, I've seen this movie hundreds of times.
And it's like, I didn't remember that at all.
Is that a reference to something?
I don't know.
It's so out of nowhere that he's just like, we're going to do a Clint Eastwood bit.
And I was gonna say it screams to me that like Bill Murray's had a Clint Eastwood bit in his back pocket for years, and he's friends enough with Harold Ramis that he's like, just give me like 5 minutes in this movie, it'll be fun.
Yeah, because to your point, I remember the armored car bit really well because it's really funny. It's him counting it off and just grabbing the money.
Quarters,
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, car. Yeah. And he just like really casually just grabs the bag of money and walks away.
Yeah.
I also forgot that the punchline, I guess, is that. And that woman's like she's not in any other scene, right?
Never see that lady again.
I like how much isn't explained sometimes.
I do enjoy that.
But on a meta level, I do wish that Bill Murray would tell me what the Clint Eastwood joke is.
The ending's still a little ambiguous for me. I don't know if we want to go into the Palm Springs stuff now, but like,
we can.
So like Palm Springs is another time loop movie that came out a few years ago at this point, I think, with 2020 with Kristen Milotti and Andy Samberg. And I don't want to spoil Palm Springs or anything, but it's much more science based about why the loop is happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And ergo at the end, the conclusion comes, while the conclusion might be ambiguous, it still like comes from a science perspective. It's a little frustrating, 30 years in the future now to be watching this movie, one of the first time loop movies, but the ending just kind of being, I guess it was, heartwarming, like I guess it was just be a good person after all. And there was like no real, like it adds to something because it's like, in movies like Palm Springs and some other time loop movies, they know they're stuck in there for a reason. Bill Murray has no idea. And I do, like, going off what you just said about the sometimes it's nice to not know, like, it is nice that, like, he doesn't know why he's here. It has all those endings, like, where, like, you think, like, oh, it's, like, almost like false endings where he does a thing and you're like, this is it. And then you just hear, I got you, babe. And it's a very, very good trigger, like, to be like, crap, this is happening again.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, that all happening while it is ambiguous does lead to the really good fake out ending of Groundhog Day, which we can also talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Bree, I don't know if you want to explain your thoughts when the final day happened, like what you were thinking.
Yeah, I thought because the movie is kind of long because the pacing is
it's
like
about an hour 40, I think.
Like it just that middle part just feels so long, like all the montages and stuff. So like when I finally there was a few fake outs and then get to the end and the music starts playing again, it's like, how much longer do we have of this movie?
She was thrashing.
I was like, can we like pause and check because there's no way. And then literally like 30 seconds later, it shows that it's the actual end. The loop is over. And I'm like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, and they just played the same song because the radio station sucks.
Yeah. I didn't super like this movie. And I'm going to say it's only because type loop movies have just been made so much better. Mm-hmm. Like, I think for the time, it was probably a great movie with a great idea, but like movies like Palm Springs that like kind of get over the whole like this is a time loop, you know it from the very beginning, and then even like with Happy Death Day, like where she doesn't quite, she knows ends up figuring out why it's happening, and it stops when she figures out why, like because the whole plot of Happy Death Day is that someone is out to kill her, and so she needs to figure out like why and who, and then once she figures that out at the end, the time loop stops. So there's a lot more of an explanation of like why it's happening and like why it stops. Like Groundhog Day, I just felt like it was just happening, and then when it got to the end, I was like, I'm kind of glad this movie's over.
Yeah, it's definitely over time, and as much as I want the Clint Eastwood bit explained to me, I like that this is just ambiguous. I think it's just, we talked a little bit about nihilism before, and it's kind of just like, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not really what it's saying, but it is sort of, I think a lot of movies around that are just kind of like, stuff happens.
Yeah. And I think I was talking with Ben about how watching The Good Place has kind of, I think, made me feel like that, or think a lot more about like philosophy going into this anyway. And I feel like a lot of this movie was very much kind of dealing with the philosophy of life and kind of like, what does life mean? What is important in life, and why, the kind of dealing with the big question of the meaning of life in general. So as I was just looking up why or who wrote this and kind of all those different things, the original screenplay, I guess, leaned a lot more into philosophy and kind of actually like articulated and discussed like the philosophy of why this could be happening in life and everything. But that was kind of dialed back to make it, one, more palatable for audiences don't really want to sit through that a lot of times, and then two, to make it funnier because they were going to have Bill Murray. And I did talk with Ben about how that seemed to be a big reason why Bill Murray and
Harold Ramis
had kind of a falling out a little bit after this movie.
a lot.
They
didn't talk for 20 years.
Yeah. And it was because Bill Murray wanted this to be more philosophy based, and he wanted to bring a lot of those things in, whereas again, it would not have been probably something that a network would have really wanted. But just getting into the philosophy at all, there's a whole theory out of Nietzsche that's called eternal reoccurrence, I think. And that's kind of what this was born out of. And it's just the theory that we all relive our lives constantly. And kind of that being an unending sort of like hellscape for some people and not for others, and having the chance to kind of knowingly be reliving a day and what that would do to your psyche.
Right.
Which is very interesting, but also was a lot to kind of, I feel like, try and portray in a movie that was an hour and 40 minutes total.
That's definitely a good point. I think you can kind of feel some of the tension of trying to get headier about it and stuff. And this is when Murray's starting to pull away and hates being famous and doesn't enjoy wanting to like be the biggest star in America as he was at the end of the 80s. So
and this is his last big starring comedy role, right? I think after this he started
pretty much.
He's like in Space Jam.
Is that kind of?
But then he starts doing Wes Anderson movies and but
yeah,
it's interesting because like I think we touched on a little. I forget if we touched on it on the podcast or off air.
I mean, Charlie's Angels in 2000. He's kind of like a big selling point.
But
for that
he's
movie.
not but he's also in all those movies. He's not the lead. Like it's not.
Well,
like
he gets replaced for the second one because he keeps verbally abusing the cast.
Yeah.
Apparently, him and Lucy Liu almost got to punching each other. So
yeah, probably good that they got rid of him.
Yep.
But it's weird to me because like I don't remember when I first watched this movie. I'm gonna guess it was probably high school or college, and then because everyone had been talking about what a great movie Groundhog Day was, and I watched it and I was like, wow, what a great movie. And then I don't think I watched it since then until now. Maybe I watched it like Kay was saying, maybe like a little bit here and there on TV. But sitting down to watch it this whole time with Bree for the first time, I kind of got done and I was like, I don't like I went in thinking like this is like one of the big Bill Murray. Like this is like besides like Ghostbusters, this might be his 2 or his 3 for like movies. Caddyshack's tough because it's more of an ensemble, but he's a big part of it.
yeah,
But I got done, and I was kind of just like, I don't think it's a bad movie. I enjoy myself. I enjoyed rewatching it, but like, yeah, I think I went from people thinking this was one of the best comedies, one of the best rom-coms of all time, to being like, I think this is just a solid movie. Like, and I don't know if that's a harsh opinion, or like a minority opinion, but like, it just felt weird for like me to be like, yeah, no, it's a great movie. Everyone knows it's a great movie. And then me now be like, no, actually, isn't it a great movie?
Yeah, I think, like we were saying before, it takes a while to get liftoff because the first almost 20 minutes are just kind of, I don't know if they're necessarily bad. I guess you have to set up that this guy sucks, but it's just, you're just hanging out with the guy who sucks.
Yeah.
And it's not really funny yet because all the jokes he's making just make him look really petty and kind of like a jerk.
Yeah, that poor lady who was just asking if he needed more coffee, and he had to like mock her like incessantly.
Right? Yeah. It's just like,
okay,
buddy.
I do like the. Do you have any deja vu? And I'll check the kitchen. Yeah. Or you ever have deja vu? Really?
Yeah.
That lady's good. She's probably like 6th build. So Murray. I guess we can go into it now. Murray and Ramis work together in Caddyshack, Stripes, Ghostbusters 2, and then this. And then they don't talk for 20 years. Ramis gets diagnosed with, I forget what illness he had that he eventually died from. I think around 2011. And then think he dies in like 2014.
Mhm.
And like Brian Doyle Murray, I guess, is the instrumental person in convincing Bill Murray to like reach out and make amends before Harold Ramis dies, which apparently they did. Murray kind of famously when he was presenting the cinematography Oscars gives a shout out to Ramis after he died. But I don't know. It's really weird. It's unclear what happened there, but they were clearly going in different directions. Ramis wanted to try and bring out the comedy side more, and Murray did not. And obviously Murray had his eye more towards serious stuff. Like you said, the Wes Anderson stuff, he makes Rushmore in 98.
Mm-hmm.
And then he still has some comedies and stuff, but he doesn't work as much. He doesn't star in a ton of stuff after that. And I guess the Wes Anderson ones, right?
Yeah,
Like Steve
he's got
Zissou
Lost in
stars in.
Translation.
And Lost in Translation, which I love. I really like Steve Zissou. That's probably the most...
The Life Aquatic.
Yes, Life Aquatic. Yeah. Well, he plays... Yeah, whatever.
Oh, I know. I just like saying The Life Aquatic.
It's a good
a
name.
great bit.
It's a good bit. That's probably the most like divisive Wes Anderson movie, as far as there's some that people are just kind of like, yeah, it's pretty good, but this is one that people are either like, oh, it's my favorite one, or like, oh, that's my least favorite one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll probably cut out all that stuff, but all that to say,
It's there if you need it.
he's got obviously an eye towards transitioning into more serious stuff. Even though he's still in a lot of crap, but you know.
Is this it for Randy McDowell? I forget if she does.
She gets bigger from here. So now this is 93.
Oh, so she still has the Hugh Grant stage.
Yes. This is 93. 94 is Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Is it still raining? I didn't notice.
Good.
Or whatever that line.
Yeah.
A very divisive line. Is
Yep.
that good or bad?
Yeah, I don't know. It made me laugh, so I guess
Yeah.
that's what it was supposed to do.
Well, with that, and again, we'll cut all this out. Is she being ironic, or does she actually not notice that it's raining?
I really hope it's
People-
the first one.
Right? Yeah. People are kind of like, oh no, she might not know it's raining. Yeah. Well, anything you guys have like notes you want to make sure we touch on?
Do we want to talk about my brief interaction with the actual inner circle?
We do. So the reason I wanted to talk about this specifically with this crew is that Sam got in trouble with the Punxsutawney Mafia once.
Yeah, so I had a blog in college that was mostly just recaps of like Game of Thrones episodes and stuff, and it was not something that was done for fame. It was not something that was done. It was more just like a creative outlet, and like maybe I would end up like maybe somebody would see it, and maybe I'd end up like writing for a site. You know, like it wasn't. My career is not writing. And when Game of Thrones ended, for the first couple years, I tried to like think of other blogs, even if they were just solo blogs, to kind of try to get to the next season and actually kind of flesh it out. Spoiler alert, that never happened. I just don't have the creative like juices flowing enough to do something like that. So like I just gave up on it. But in the in-between, there were a few blogs that I did, one of which was based on the Groundhog Day Inner Circle, the Punxsutawney Inner Circle. So these are all the guys in suits and top hats that you see every time they're holding up the groundhog and stuff. And just to go into it a little bit, in case you have no idea about anything, it's just a bunch of like older white dudes that live in and around this town. They give themselves fun nicknames. Like they're all, by all accounts, they're nice nerdy dudes that just really like to, like do this nice, wholesome fun.
They just hang out at the knob.
Yeah, they just hang out at the knob, and I just did a blog that just eviscerated them for no reason. I accused them all of crimes. For the most part, I made fun of their names. It was also like 10 years ago, so unfortunately there was some body shaming in there and stuff that was not great, which I do feel bad about. But all this suffice to say, the vice president of the actually I should start with this. Sorry. All this suffice to say, my blog usually got anywhere between 200 and like 400 hits on reads on a good like Game of Thrones like end of season blog. Most of the time it was under 100. This blog had over 1,000 views, and I knew something was up immediately, and I didn't know why. And so I didn't get that many comments. It was a very small blog that was shared with friends, and so mostly if people had a comment, they just tell me. But I got an email from a message, and I looked so I had to go into my WordPress stats, and I see I got a bunch of emails, and it is an email from Jeff Lundy, who was at the time vice president of the Inner Circle. He is now the president of the Inner Circle. It had his email on it, so I know it. I know it was him. And I accused in the blog. His title was fair weatherman, I believe. So I accused him of being a fake weatherman. And I think I probably made fun of some, I called him probably some name, and he just sent me a very nice note that was just like, "Hey Sam, come out to Punxsutawney, and we'll show you a good time. Signed, falsely accused weatherman," or something like that.
No, I think you accused him of treason or something.
Oh yeah, I accused some people of some really bad stuff.
I did reread it a little bit. I was like, you really went after these guys.
Yeah, it was bad.
Or bribery or something. It wasn't just fake weatherman. I think it was an actual crime.
Yeah, you know what? I'll do myself the disservice. I'll look up what I said to poor Jeff Lundy.
No.
And it's I think it's so of a time, because that was just what comedy was then, kind of, and the blogs that we were both reading.
Yep, for sure.
It has a very Bill Simmons voice kind of thing going on.
Yeah, it's just
because that was also what Bill Simmons was doing.
Yeah,
well, it's
for
just
sure.
hyperbolic, sort of, kind of over the top.
Yeah.
You were expecting no one to take that seriously,
Right.
Yeah, in this bit, I make fun of. I have a Minnesota Vikings yacht reference. That's just how old this blog is. That was over 10 years ago.
I think Simmons still makes Minnesota Vikings yacht references.
Yeah, his potential crime. So the thing I did was I mentioned their title. I made fun of their bio, and I gave him a crime, and his crime was perjury for saying a groundhog is all knowing, that a podunk town has a crazy nightlife, and impersonating a weatherman. But he sent a nice, and he's now the president. I don't think I saw him in this movie. There were some for sure people in this movie that were in my blog like this. So whatever, obviously there's probably been a lot of turnover. It was 30 years ago. I made this blog 10 years ago. So even still 20 years after this movie came out. But there were some faces I recognized from the blog. So they definitely got the actual Inner Circle to be there, and just sprinkled Brian Doyle Murray in there to be a mouthpiece. But yeah, so that was so suffice to say, everyone on the Inner Circle definitely read that blog, because I think the entire town of Punxsutawney might have read it, because I got way more views.
Oh man. Yeah, that must have been terrifying. Did you respond to his email?
I did not, and I've never gone to Punxsutawney.
I would not have either.
It's funny thinking that he has the two biggest movie groundhogs, probably, because he's got the gopher, who is, I assume, is the same as a groundhog, but it's an animatronic. So he fights an animatronic gopher 14 years previous or 13 years previous, and then is in a car with an actual groundhog.
Yeah. I'm always surprised to see that, oh no, that's a real groundhog when he's driving.
Is that the groundhog, or did they just get a groundhog?
I'm not even.
They filmed in Illinois, so it probably is a different groundhog. Is it actually the same groundhog in Punxsutawney every year?
Yeah, I would assume that there's a pretty. They
must have a few to pick from.
I'll go ask Jeff Lundy. He'll get that. Hey Jeff, it's been 10 years.
It's been 10 years. I've thought a lot about my response, and I'm not sorry, but I have a couple questions. Anyway, if you guys were living the same day for months, years, decades, however long it is, what would you get really good at?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was talking about if they did it now, it'd be funny, because if they do it now, I work from home, so most of my weeks, just playing close or playing most likely's, I'm gonna wake up on a day that me and Bree are working. Bree's not expecting me to leave, so I would have to find some excuse to even go do anything, or else Bree would be like, "What are you?" You'd just be super suspicious. What are you doing? Why are you leaving for no reason? And then I would probably just act sick. But then I don't know, because it's weird, because on one hand you think, well, maybe I just play a bunch of video games, but then unless you can beat it in one day, it's gonna your progress isn't gonna carry over.
Well, that would be frustrating.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, those were my first thoughts. It would be bad, but I don't know. I could play a lot of video games. Nope, you actually can't. You can play them. You can't beat a lot of them.
Yeah, there's I guess you now have anything you want to learn, you can grab on YouTube.
Yeah.
A lot you'd have to work a lot harder in the early 90s to get knowledge about these things. So
Probably read a lot of books. 'cause
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like I can just go to the library, take out a book, read it, and know I have to
That's-
just keep doing
yeah,
that.
that's one thing that it does show him doing is that at least, okay, you just remember what page you're on, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely learn a lot of languages.
That was my
Yeah.
thought too. I was like, I would want to take the time to actually like learn a lot of like languages. Was kind of my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you can't really like travel. You can't really go far because you're
No.
going to reset. Although I think in Palm Springs, it's not until you fall asleep.
Correct.
So like one of them, on like one of the ones she's saying, she like stayed up for like 18 hours straight once and like
Yeah.
got like all the way to like South America and then
Right.
woke
Yeah.
up or fell
Doesn't
asleep.
matter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like Andy Samberg talks about the worst days being the ones where you're in a hospital and they're trying to keep you awake because you have a concussion or something like that, and you're just in pain for like 40 straight hours, but then you fall asleep and you end up back because it doesn't matter. It's the sleep's the trigger.
Right.
So like if that's the case, like I probably would try to just stay up as long as possible, learning languages and stuff. But it'd be tough because like at least like I was talking to her, at least it's a weird day because like Bill Murray even says in the movie, like of all the days that have to repeat, like he has like a story that like he's like on a beach on vacation and he hooks up with a girl and he's like, why couldn't that be the day that I keep repeating? Like it is
A
funny.
blizzard in Western PA.
Yeah, like if I'm repeating a day where I'm at home, I feel like for the most part it'd be fine. But like you think if I'm repeating a day that I'm like traveling or something and like I'm kind of stuck wherever I am, it would be a lot tougher. Because like you said, he's got to go find a piano person. He has to like, there could have been a timeline, or he could have been in that timeline where that lady was just like, I'm off for Groundhog Day
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not there. And there could have just been no one there to learn piano. And granted, that's not a big part of the movie, but like, there could be limitations to what you can actually.
It's probably a harder experience, but you can just pull up piano tutorials on YouTube now.
True.
But yeah, I had the same thought of like, you would want to be somewhere where it's like you have access to all of your stuff and kind of can do things. Whereas like my first time I went to London or something would have been like really cool to kind of see and do all again. But then like that would quickly become old.
Yep.
And then you would be stuck with somewhere where you don't have good access to internet and things that would actually be helpful for you. So probably the best would be you're at home, you can kind of
just doing your normal home stuff, and you've got all your stuff with you. It's important. It's weird talking about in Palm Springs. It's the sleeping. They never address it. Maybe it doesn't work, but they never address if he just stays up until 6 a.m. sees what happens.
seems like he had because he mentions like it doesn't reset till 6.
Right. Yeah. I think that was like one small line
Because she tried to wait till midnight and he's like, that's not when it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do. Get good at lassoing or something.
Lassoing.
Do the Michelle Pfeiffer whips.
Get the Michelle Pfeiffer whips.
Great. That'd be great.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. Because, like you were saying with video games or any project, really, you can't do any long-term project.
No, you can't build anything. You can't. You can't paint a painting unless you get done with it. Or like some. I guess you could paint a paint. That's a bad example. But like
you get really good at painting, but you don't get to keep any of the artwork.
It ends up being like the Bob Ross thing. Like you keep doing it until you just get so good that you're just fast at it. Because that's whole like Bob Ross's whole like 10,000 hours was just learning to do it really quick so he can do that show. But that's the only thing I can think of is like maybe getting more efficient at like art stuff. But video games are screwed unless it's something you can beat in a day or you're just playing multiplayer.
Yeah. I guess, what he did, like learning
who just
skills.
play Warzone.
Yeah. Because that's like the weird thing is it's like, I would feel like I would just come into a system where like if I was working that day, just be like, oh, I'm fake a sickness and just stay home. Tell Bree not to worry about me. Like I'll just keep working. I'll be fine. Like it's not that bad. I'm just taking the day. Yeah. Everyone's fine with it.
It's probably not as bad now as if we had done this a year and a half ago, but obviously maybe not parallels, but the quarantine times when you're just kind of living the same day over and over again without variation. This might have been a rougher watch.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. We're like,
For sure. So we already talked about Palm Springs, Happy Death Day. There's a lot of video games that by nature, even before there's explicit time loop video games, time looping is sort of just a core mechanic, having extra lives or
or
that's
save
what I was
scumming.
whatever,
Yeah.
or save scumming, whatever.
Was waiting.
Yeah, Bill Murray's essentially save scumming, right?
Yeah.
So Majora's Mask,
Yep.
Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is a big one. Bill Murray's just playing that song of time at the end, going back and back. Deathloop this year and Loop Hero, just from this, when I say this year, 2021, are, the looping mechanics are huge.
Yeah.
Dark Souls games are basically time loops.
Mhm.
Outer Wilds.
Outer Wilds is a
Jinx.
huge time loop one. Yeah, time looping is a hugely popular mechanic in video games that people are still wringing dry. So I don't know.
Yeah,
12 minutes.
12. Yeah, we need a whole nother podcast for 12 minutes. That game stinks. But
Only up till the very end. The game was good, and then the ending was whack. But
anyway,
Whack.
not to pour the movie podcast. But
we're talking about
Picture
time
the
loops.
Hannibal Buress gif where he's going whack.
that's basically the end. If the ending of that game
Whack.
instead of was just Willem Dafoe walking in the room and saying whack in a Hannibal Buress voice, it would have been better than the actual ending they had.
Yeah, it looks
but-
not like
But
not a
I
good
mean,
experience.
yeah, it's fun because those video games that you mentioned, and even games like Life is Strange, the first one has like a very minor time loop mechanic because the whole thing is that she can rewind like 15 seconds or something like that and change like her decision or change. But like the major decisions are set in stone because it's like, oh, I'm going to tell this person and then walk away, and then it's going to be too late to change. But like it's fun because like a lot of stuff like you even said, like save scumming and like any decision based game where stuff changes, like a Mass Effect or a Telltale game. It's inherently fun, but it's different in me or with me because like a lot of stuff in video games, it's driven by successes, like successful, like completion of a task or getting the best ending or getting the best like result. Whereas like in movies, it's almost inherently, I guess Happy Death Day is kind of more like a video game in its time loop because she's trying to fix a problem.
Yes, yeah.
But like stuff like Groundhog Day in Palm Springs, it seems much more just kind of like, all right, let's master a skill. It's almost like a roguelike of a movie. Like it's like we're just gonna keep running our head into the ground until we gain enough stuff, like a Hades kind of. I don't know how many people have played Hades.
Now you're getting to
but-
roguelites, which is
but it's like the same
kind
kind
of time
thing.
loopy, but
Because while the stage changes, unlike the movie, like unlike a Groundhog Day movie.
well,
it's the
there's
same-
time loops where it's the same exact thing and you just gain a little more knowledge, and then there's more roguelites where the more you do the loops, the more you're progressing because you're getting more skill, you're getting more resources and stuff. So
But you-
slightly different.
Yeah, but you can argue that that's kind of what Bill Murray's doing. He's almost like he's in a roguelike
Yeah,
because he's
he's playing
getting his
Hades.
skills. He's figuring out the best way to do something.
Well, he can't really like gain resources. He's just getting knowledge.
Yeah. So being a good guy is him beating Hades is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Him finding out, oh crap, this all just comes down to I need to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I don't know. So you didn't really like it that much.
No, so if I wouldn't have watched any other time loop movie, like if I was like, well, this movie came out before I was born, but like if I had seen it before all these other movies and played all these other games, I probably would have enjoyed it way more. But the formula has just been perfected since then. Maybe a little overdone because I feel like time loop is like as a mechanic and as like a trope is like really coming back in the last few years. But I just feel like there's been so many other movies that have done it so much better. I like the interactiveness with time loop games more than watching it in a movie. So the movie itself is not bad. I just feel like since it's been done so much better since then, it's just kind of like tainted, like watching like the OG of it. It's like, well, I can just watch Palm Springs or I can watch Happy Death Day or I can play Majora's Mask.
What do you think about this movie? I'm actually curious because I think we've all kind of given various.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's like I said, the beginning it takes a little while to really get into it, but then the time looping stuff's fun. I like a lot of the supporting performances. I mean, really, Tobolowsky is what we're talking about here. We love Tobolowsky. I think it's just overall pretty fun. I think once Murray gets into his more comfort zone, kind of taking it easy, because that's just like Murray's whole thing is already kind of like, oh, none of this matters, and I'm just going to kind of do what's fun.
Mhm.
So once he actually gets into that headspace, I think it kind of takes off a little more. And it does, without going so crazily into the dark side of how time loops can go, it still does touch on a lot of more serious things. And I guess the kind of modulation, like we said before, with Murray's performance here is what leads him into where I guess he wanted to be, some more serious roles. And yeah, I don't know. I like it a lot. I like Andy McDowell a lot. So yeah, I think it's a good time. Is it my favorite Chris Elliott movie? I don't know.
Snow Day.
God, that's him in Snow Day.
That's pretty good. Yeah,
That's a great one.
I can't think of that
A
many.
great pull, not a great movie.
That's valid.
just to
we'll do
clarify.
Cabin Boy eventually.
Yeah, I was gonna say all the Chris Elliott movies I can think of are just awful. So it's tough to like.
Yeah.
He's much more of a sitcom person in my head.
Especially now.
Yeah.
I mean, now after Schitt's
Just pretty-
Creek, like,
he was in How I Met Your Mother for a bit.
yes. I think it's a pretty good movie. Sometimes I remember that we kind of rate these occasionally. So what would everyone rate it on any scale of your choosing? I'd say maybe like a solid 8.
Punxsutawney's.
Punxsutawney. Solid 8 groundhogs out of 10.
8 woodchucks.
7 between 7 and 8, but 7.5 sounds bad for some reason.
That's where I was landing. I was like right in like the 7.5 range.
I would say I'm more comfortable with a 4 out of 5 groundhogs.
So it's crazy to me. I was gonna say it's crazy to me that I would have said this was like when people would ask me, I would have been like, oh yeah, 4 or 5 star movie, or like, oh, on a 10 scale, I probably would have said like a 9. But rewatching it really, it really does come down to what Bree said with the. I feel like there's just been better time loop movies since, and there's just a little. It's aged a little badly with all like the. He's very forceful. He's very like caustic. He straight up assaults Andy McDowell at one point. Like it gets stuff like that. It kind of just like. You don't end up knowing who you're cheering for until way too far into the movie.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like I said, I do appreciate, even coming out in 93, it does show that doesn't work.
Yes. Fair.
And
It was not successful.
that she gets like mad at him about it, but it doesn't entirely reckon with it in the way it would have to today, where it's like, oh, this is actually a bad person.
Yeah.
Right.
It never really says this is a bad person, and more than just like this guy's a jerk and he has to learn to not be quite so much of a jerk.
Yeah.
Bree, what's your rating?
It's just average for me, honestly. Like I said, I appreciate the formula, and it was like, I think it was the first movie of its kind, because everything we call using the formula, we call a Groundhog's Day movie.
Yeah.
So it's not the newest, or not the newest. I don't think it's like the very first like media that has done it, but I think it was the most prolific.
I was gonna say it's definitely the one that became like part of the lexicon.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Because
Yes.
I
When you
think there
know-
might have been like books or something before.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe there was some older movie where they did something like it, but it was definitely the first like most prolific one to like spawn the trope. So I appreciate that, but as a movie, I don't super like it all that much.
Yeah,
so I'd
this
probably
is
give it
a-
5 out of 10.
This is a cultural point of reference, which is something we hadn't mentioned before because it just kind of goes without saying. Even if you haven't seen this movie before, you've heard of it in that context, I would say.
Like people would point out, like I was like, "Oh, what's Palm Springs?" And like people would say time loop movie, but like I'm sure somebody along the line said to me, "Oh, it's like Groundhog Day," but like
Yeah.
with
I feel like
two
I
people,
just-
like-
that's
I was like, I
described
feel
it,
like
yeah.
I
Yeah.
described it like that to
Yeah.
someone. Like I said, it's like Groundhog Day. Like
Yeah,
But
yeah,
two
absolutely.
people
That's
and, like,
definitely a thing.
new, like
yeah, you don't have to
exactly.
go further.
Like,
Like,
Yeah.
I had never watched
And
Groundhog
J.K.
Day before
Simmons.
this.
yeah, J.K.
Yeah.
Simmons. And the good thing is that like Bree touched on, like you don't have because Groundhog Day exists, because time loop has been a thing. You don't have to sit there and spend all the time like being like, oh my god, I'm in a time loop. It's just Andy Samberg comes in, they end up in the time loop, and Andy Samberg is like, you're in a time loop. This is what happens. These
Yeah.
are the rules. Done. Like, and we just move on.
Palm
and
Springs
get
did
to
it
the rest
so
of the
well
movie.
without having to do all those like
Yeah.
montages and stuff.
But
It's
without
like you
Groundhog
already
Day,
know.
they probably would have. So
That's
like,
that's
it's
the thing.
kinda
Yeah,
thing.
they
It's
did
like,
they laid such a
It's
good
foundational.
foundation.
Yeah.
It's
That it made way for Palm Springs and Happy Death Day to well, I wouldn't say Happy Death Day is at the same level of Palm Springs. I think Palm Springs is a much better movie, but Happy Death Day is still a very fun movie, and it's still a very good time loop movie. But yeah, those two movies wouldn't have been anywhere near as good if they didn't have Groundhog Day as a foundation for those movies.
absolutely. Yeah.
I don't normally just like look up trivia and then go, this one's interesting, and then say it, but this one was. Stephen Tobolowsky was the honorary ground marshal in the Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. I guess a parade of some sort on February 2nd, 2010. So yeah, parade, or just can you Grand Marshal just an event? I guess maybe you can.
Yeah. He just introduced some waves a little bit.
Yeah. So he was the Grand Marshal. In his speech on stage, he performed the whistling belly button act to which he refers in the film.
Huh.
Which just sounded like a throwaway nonsense thing, but I guess it's a
You
thing
can actually do it.
Steven Tobolowsky can do.
Toblerone's got in his back pocket for any moment.
I'm just reading that now. I'm sure that's findable on YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, thanks. I almost forgot. I keep almost forgetting, but I didn't. You can reach us by Googling us. And if that doesn't work, check out the Instagram. It is late to the movies _podcast. That's the number 2, not 2 spelled out. And same deal with the email, late to the movies @gmail.com. And give us any feedback you want, or if there's movies you think we should cover. If there's complaints you need to lodge, that's fine too.
Since I have a mic in front of me, I'd like to lodge a formal complaint against Greg for slandering both Frozen 2 and Wreck-It Ralph 2 in the last by saying they were trash. They are not trash.
I think he said Frozen 2 was by far the worst. So there's like a big gulf.
Yeah, I'm gonna
even
have
in
to
his
throw
mind.
some hands at that because Frozen 2 is better than Frozen 1. It's a
Whoa,
start.
that is
I disagree with that, but
that is a nice cold take, I think.
she really likes like wind noises or whatever the hell.
And I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is a good time.
Yep.
But hey, whatever.
I also liked it.
Thanks, guys.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Bye. And as you guys know, I don't really know how to start the podcast, so it'll be something like Time Loop or Welcome to Late to the Movies. My name. We'll trail off right then. We'll trail off right then.
We should have played. We should have ended with like the "I Got You, Babe."
Yeah.
Just like
Hey, little hand in mine, there ain't no mountain we can climb.
Dun, dun,
Wonder
dun,
Movies.
dun, dun.
Late to the movies.
Dun, 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 dun.